We all know about the familiar universe in which we live, but have you ever entertained the possibility of other universes entirely different from our own? These parallel universes exist alongside our own, and there have been stories about people transporting between universes. The concept of parallel universes is unsettling for many people. It's hard to wrap your mind around the idea that there could be other versions of yourself out there, living in alternate realities. It's even more terrifying to think about what could happen if those universes collided. Thankfully, we have no way of knowing for sure whether parallel universes exist. But that doesn't stop our imaginations from running wild. Curiosity is often what drives humans to achieve great things. Still, it can be scary to imagine a version of yourself existing in a universe where you are entirely different from the original. The scariest parallel universe stories are often the ones that come unexpectedly. Let's look at the scariest parallel universe stories from unsuspecting people who have experienced another dimension. If the Beatles never broke up, they would have continued to make music together and tour the world. As one of the most successful bands of all time, their legacy would be even more remarkable than it is today. The Beatles started making music in 1962 and officially broke up in 1969, but what if they never broke up? A man claims that in a parallel dimension he visited, the Beatles never broke up, and they continue to make the music that Beatle fans love. In 2009, a man who goes by the alias James Richards from Livermore, California, was driving home with his dog from Turlock after visiting some friends. After driving for some time, Richards noticed that his dog needed a bathroom break, so he pulled over and stopped so his dog could relieve herself. While the dog was taking care of her business, she saw a rabbit in the distance and began chasing it. Richard started running after his dog. The dog and the rabbit were a ways ahead of Richards, so he had a lot of ground to cover in a short time. The terrain was uneven and full of obstacles. Just like any horror movie, Richards tripped over a rabbit hole and knocked himself unconscious. When he came to, he was disoriented and his head was throbbing. This is where the strange events started to take place. When Richards woke up, his head was bandaged and he was lying on a couch. He had no idea how he got there and felt uneasy. You may say a friendly stranger helped him out, but Richards was in Del Porta Canyon, a rural area with no houses nearby, so you can understand his unease. Another weird thing was that Richards heard traffic outside. Once again, before his accident, he was in an unpopulated rural area with no traffic. He looked towards the window in the room, which was near an unusual-looking electric machine that he didn't recognize. This particular piece of equipment looked out of place in a room full of electronics and furniture since Richards believed he was in a home setting, and the device looked out of place in a home. Richard felt uneasy, so he made his way to the only window in the room when the door opened, and his dog ran in with a man following behind her. The man looked nice enough. He was well dressed, about 6 foot tall, with medium-length black hair, and introduced himself as Jonas. Richards asked Jonas, "Where am I?" Jonas replied, "About 20 feet away from where you fell." Richards was completely confused. Once again, he was in a rural area when he fell. Richards told Jonas that wasn't possible. It was then that Jonas dropped a bomb on Richards. Jonas said the truth would be unbelievable, and it was. Jonas said he transferred Richards to a parallel Earth with his parallel travel machine, the odd-looking machine sitting near the window. Jonas said he traveled to the Earth we know and found Richards knocked out in the blazing heat without anyone nearby to help. The story gets crazier. Jonas says the parallel travel machine is pretty popular in his dimension, and people travel to different dimensions pretty often because there are an infinite number of Earths to explore. Richards was mesmerized and started asking tons of questions, comparing the differences between the parallel universes. They soon began talking about several things in their respective universes, and soon, the subject of pop culture and the Beatles became the subject of their discussion. Richard found out that not only did all the Beatles exist in the Jonas universe, but that Jonas' brother had just seen them in concert. Oh, and they all were still alive. At this point, Richard's mind was blown because John Lennon and George Harrison had passed away in his world. Richards was even able to listen to some of the Beatles' music that doesn't exist in our world. According to Richards, CDs don't exist in Jonas' world because they never caught on. Richards was able to hear music from a cassette tape, but it was clear that the technology was not as advanced as in our world. When it was time to go home, Richards asked for a copy of the cassette tape, but was told under no circumstances were souvenirs to be taken back. Well, Richards had other ideas and snuck a Beatles cassette tape titled Everyday Chemistry in his pocket before he entered the portal to journey back to our world. The cassette contained several songs that were never released in our dimension. Richards knows how crazy everything sounds, traveling to another dimension and stealing a Beatles cassette tape with music from the future. For any unbelievers, Richards has uploaded the music on his site. The Beatles never broke up. Some might think he's just a crazy conspiracy theorist, but Richards is convinced that he experienced something special. One of the most famous incidents of a parallel universe experience is about an interdimensional traveler in 1954. Known as the Man from Taured, the strange incident occurred at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. The customs agents were checking the documents and passports of passengers, as usual, but noticed something strange about this particular traveler's passport. The passport and the documents belonged to a well-dressed businessman who said he was traveling for business. He spoke fluent Japanese and French. Airport security officials noticed that his passport was issued from a country named Taured, which is a country that doesn't exist in our world and never has. When he was asked to show where Taured was on a map, he pointed to a small area on the border between France and Spain. The area he pointed to was the Principality of Andorra. The customs agents told him that Taured didn't exist, and he became confused and refused to believe them, telling them that Taured had been in existence for 1,000 years. The man, who was becoming increasingly agitated with all the questioning, showed the customs agents several official stamps from different European countries. All of them looked legitimate. However, the agents were still skeptical and took the man to a nearby local hotel until they could further investigate the matter. Security guards were stationed outside the hotel room so that if this mysterious traveler was indeed in Japan for nefarious reasons, he couldn't escape. The man agreed to the customs agent's terms and entered the room. When the guards opened the room the next morning, they were surprised to see that despite tight security, the man had disappeared. Pedro Olivia Ramirez. On November 9, 1986, at 11:15 p.m., Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving from Seville to Alcalá de Guadalajara, where he had been temporarily residing, when something weird happened. Nothing notable occurs in the first part of his drive until passing a curve, and he suddenly notices 3 lanes of double width are on one road in both directions. This is something new and very unfamiliar to him. He was very familiar with this route because he drove it often, so he was shocked, to say the least. When he looked around, he saw strange structures with weird landscapes surrounding him. He noticed the cars around him were old and had small white license plates that were passing him with an interval of 8-minute gaps. Suddenly, he felt a sudden rise in temperature and a strange echo of voices coming from a distance. Immediately, a voice, different from other voices, told him that he was just teleported into another dimension. Ramirez was confused, but he kept driving. After some time, he found the turnoff to his left, where the signboard was located, pointing to Alcala, Malaga, and Seville. Ramirez took the turn towards Seville. After some time, when he stopped his car, he was shocked to see that he was standing outside his house in Alcala de Guadera. When he drove back to see those signboards and highways again, he couldn't find any trace of the crossroads, signboards, or the 6-lane highway. The Marcahuasi Stone Forest in Peru has been the subject of many legends over the years. Before settlers arrived, it was already known to be a paranormal hotspot. With the strange, human-like faces on the rocks and the overall eerie vibe, it's easy to see why many people think there is something otherworldly about this place. Dr. Raul Rios Centeno is a physician-turned-paranormal investigator who has personally witnessed something that could not be explained. Dr. Rios Centeno treated a patient with hemiplegia resulting from a trip to the Marcahuasi Stone Forest. The hemiplegia wasn't a result of a traumatic injury. Allegedly, it occurred when entering a cabin in the forest. When he asked her what had occurred, she replied that she and her friends had been camping near the stone forest even though they had been warned about the odd disappearance of travelers in the area. She and her friends heard people laughing and playing music in the distance near the campground. They followed the sounds and discovered a strange stone cabin lit with torches where people were inside dancing and laughing. She said she saw people laughing and dancing from the doorway dressed in 17th century clothing, but she still felt something cold and wrong about the celebration. She tried to enter the cabin out of curiosity, but a friend grabbed her and pulled her out of the cabin in a panic, leaving the part of her body that entered the cabin paralyzed. Dr. Rios Centeno theorizes that her sudden trip into another dimension had permanently damaged her nervous system. Brain scans showed her brain developed strange symptoms after the incident, demonstrating high energy levels in the parts controlling the paralyzed half of her body. When investigators later went to search for the cabin, it had disappeared. That wraps up our Scariest Parallel Universe Stories. Do you believe in parallel universes? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Don't Freak Out for more videos.